Hi, welcome to my tying bench. You know, when it comes to stillwater patterns, I love flies that move and breathe and spring to life when wet. And one of the best materials to achieve this effect are aftershaft or filoplume feathers. Today I'm going to show you how to tie the Filo Bugger, a pattern that was shown to me by my friends at the Inland Empire Club in Spokane, Washington. It's a variation of my aftershaft leech, a fly that was featured in my first book, Fly Patterns for Still Waters. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you enjoy my channel, please subscribe. And if you want to get notification of future videos, simply hit that bell and you'll be emailed whenever I upload a new video. Be sure to check out the comments below for the pattern recipe, the tools and materials I use to tie this fly. Now join me at the bench and I'll show you how to manage this soft but brittle material so you can tie some Filo Buggers for yourself. Learning to work with brittle aftershaft feathers may take some practice. Thankfully, the material list for the Filo Bugger is short. Here is what you'll need. Remember, it's always a good idea to have a variety of different colored Filo Buggers in your fly box. So let's tie the Filo Bugger. This is a variation of my aftershaft leech, and it was introduced to me by my friends at the Inland Empire Club in Spokane, Washington, Jerry McBride, the originator of the Balanced Fly series, and Scott, and Jim, and who else am I missing here? Leon, so many of my friends from that club. I've spoken to that club on a number of occasions, and of course they've joined me in Manitoba and put this fly to good use out there. So let's tie it for you. So into the jaws of the vise, we've got a Daiichi 4640 60-degree jig hook. This is one stout hook. I fell in love with this hook style when I went to Argentina because it could hold up down there in those big rainbows. It never straightened. So very stout hook. We're going to lay a base of thread down onto the shank. Some black thread here. And usually I build these chassis, which I'm going to show you now, kind of production style. And then once the chassis were all built, then tie the fly. We're going to tie this continuously. So for the chassis, it's a pin, rather a tungsten bead mounted on a pin. And originally I used to use common household pins that I would cut to length. And that still certainly works. If you're going to use the cut pin, you would cut a pin a distance from the hook point to a vertical line down from the hook eye is a good proportional reference. The drawback to a cut pin, of course, is that cut end is kind of ragged and can break thread. So I now use the sequin pins that I get at Michael's in either gold or silver. So onto the sequin pin, I slid a 1/8 tungsten bead. It has to be tungsten, and 1/8 for this stout hook. Lighter wire hooks, you might be able to get it to balance with a 7/64. And if you go bigger, you can even use one size up even if you want. But there comes a point these balance flies get a bit heavy and not fun to throw on a thin level leader that you need when you're indicator fishing with these so you get a true sink. And you can see that that bead head, the wide end, envelops that pin head. So we'll take that out of the hackle pliers. So we're just going to tie this on. And what I do is I'll get my fingers out of the way, but I usually like to make sure that I have at least enough pin length here that I can envision getting a couple more beads on there comfortably. So that looks good. We'll lash that down. That's a good proportional reference point. You could certainly take the hook out at this point and balance it and adjust the pin if you wanted to. But we got that lashed in. And then we are going to, at this point, if I was building these production style, I'd whip finish and build another chassis. But we're going to add a little super glue here just to reinforce the chassis. If you want, you can put a little dab on that pin head too to help hold it, and then just push that forward and it'll tack up and hold the pin for you. And then we'll just carry on, cover the remainder of the shank. The rest now is really just fly tying, and this fly's pretty simple, although forming the body, the dubbing loop method we're going to use has a few wrinkles. So the fly is constructed entirely out of materials from a pheasant rump patch or loose pheasant. Okay, this is blue phase, but we're tying this in a natural gray coloration. This may not look like a natural leech or minnow color, but when it darkens, it really looks sweet. So the body we're going to tie out of the filoplume, which is this, or aftershaft, which is this secondary feather that's stuck onto the main feather. So we're going to take that off right now. We'll come back to that later. And for the tail, we're actually going to use just the flue right off the base of the feather here. So I'm going to strip away this sort of shorter fibers at this point to isolate sort of the fibers that are all the same length. So I'm just going to stand them perpendicular to the stem and strip them off. And this is very light and sparse, so we need probably a couple of applications to form the tail. So we're going to form a tail that's about the shank length long. And then I'm just going to take my scissors here and I'm just going to trim these where it was attached to the butts, those stiffer curlies that'll get in the way. And we're just going to secure that. And what I've done is I'm actually kind of securing it on the far side of the shank. And then we'll come forward. And you notice I started it right behind the pin. That's just going to even out our body. And then I'm going to do the same. So I'm now, again, just to review, I'm going to strip away these shorter fibers to isolate this section of the feather where the fibers are more or less the same length. And we're just going to gently strip and fold those off the feather as best we can. We've got our second clump here. It's kind of sparse and ragged, so we'll just measure that up. Just going to trim those curly bits off the end of the feather here. And secure them down. So this is a little finer fibers than sort of regular marabou, but we got a nice tail in there. We're going to add a little bit of flash to it, so I'm just going to take a couple strands of crystal flash, lay them onto the shank, just get them on, and I'm going to take the two strands that, and you can do it either way, and just grab these and I'm going to secure those down the far side of the tail, and then I'm going to bring that thread forward again, grab the two strands forward to the original tying point and move those down and secure them along the near side of the tail. So I've kind of enveloped that tail. It's just a little bit of flash in there. You could argue it's even optional, but just a little bit of attractiveness in there. And you see I've moistened that just to keep the tail all gathered and together. Now we're going to form a body out of dubbed, strand of thread there, out of these dubbed aftershaft feathers. So if we look at this feather here, what we want to do, there's some preparation we've got to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in and that little butt right there where it attached to the main feather, I'm just going to trim that away because sometimes that can pop out of the loop. And then I'm just going to take the tip section where it kind of gets a little unruly and goes in different directions and just pinch that away. So I end up with an aftershaft feather that's essentially the same width along its length. And I'm going to do that for 3 or 4 feathers. For this fly, 4 feathers is probably fine. And we're going to combine these into a dubbing loop. Here's another one prepared. So we want to make sure that we keep the loop manageable. So we've pulled the camera wide to show you how we're going to dub these aftershaft feathers because they're very brittle, very thin core, but if you tried to tie them in and wind them like a traditional feather, you might get it done once in a while, but for the most part they're just going to break on you. So what we're going to do, this is the one of the few times I use dubbing wax. I've got my well-used swax, high-tack swax here. So I'm just going to coat a length of tying thread. And you want to keep this dubbing loop manageable. You can always, if you've got a bigger bodied fly or need more, build a second loop. You don't want to have a 14-inch dubbing loop. Very hard to be accurate with and you'll probably bust your knuckles. So now we're going to take that prepared feather and lay it onto the tacky thread right down Main Street. So by Main Street I mean I've got the stem of the feather, I'm aligning them tip to butt, one behind the other, down the thread. and I've got enough room to get 3 on here, so that's where we're going to stop, right? So that's there. Now I'm just going to come up and gently around my forefinger, bring the tying thread back up and start winding this dubbing loop back. Okay, and then I'm going to introduce my dubbing hook into the loop to replace my finger and start spinning, trying not to get any of these fibers to slide out. And now we've trapped the feathers sandwich them between the thread strands. If there's one, this one's sliding a bit, and then we just start twisting slowly and slowly and slowly, and it'll just start to spin like a drill bit. And eventually, when those fibers, I've got them trapped now, I can actually off camera give this dubbing tool a good spin, and when those fibers radiate out 90 degrees, and we can come in with our finger and just brush them like this to free them up. Now we're just going to secure that loop right back to the base of the tail and advance our tying thread forward, and we're ready to wrap our body. Alright, so we got the dubbing loop completed. We're going to wind it forward. Hopefully we've got enough here to get up to the hook eye. If we don't, we just form a second loop and maybe put a couple of fibers in. Again, a small loop is much more easy to manage, more accurate wraps. So we're just going to wind that around, and with each wrap I'm going to use my left thumb and forefinger just to sweep those fibers back out of the way, and you're going to end up with this just fuzzy mess. But with the beauty of these Aftershaft fibers that we get from pheasant rump, you can also get them from grizzly marabou, and feathers like that, any game bird, partridge, but the pheasant rump's the best source. And we're just going to wind those forward, get right up to that hook eye, and just go right on by it. You can actually tuck a couple of wraps if you want on a bit of a diagonal. I don't know if you quite saw, but I'll pull back on an angle like so and bring that right up, and it looks like we're going to have just enough. So the 3 Aftershaft feathers was enough. And just wind those right up, and that's pushing the bead tight against that pin head and locking it in place. This just worked out perfectly. So we can moisten our fingers a little bit to expose the hook eye, and now we're just going to come up over the top a couple of times to lock that thread off, and then a couple more in front, and then reach in on the top of the hook to avoid accidentally trimming our thread. And now we're just going to apply a little super glue to about 3/8 of an inch or so of the thread. Moisten our fingers to expose the rear of the bead. Sweep those fibers back. Get that super glue in place, and then just a 3 to 5 turn whip finish. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Disengage, trim, and your Filo Bugger is complete. Now this doesn't look like much dry, but when this fly gets wet, all those little marabou-like fibers are going to pulse and breathe and just suggest life. And this is the natural gray ones. You can tie them in olive and brown, black, whatever color pheasant rump you can find. You can mix and match colors, so alternate the different colored filoplumes or Aftershaft feathers into that dubbing loop and create some neat mottled effects. Brown and olive is a great camo effect. So there is the Filo Bugger, balanced Filo Bugger. So make sure you add a few of these into your balanced leech section of your fly box. It's a killer.